A change in United States foreign policy is overdue. We live in a time in which our government has come to require imperial military escalations to promote social unity. I agree with what Harvard philosophy professor Dr. John Cagg writes in his paper, A Call to Arms, William James on Militarism and Political Unity, that we should examine the relation between militarism and political unity in a way that it exposes the relevance of American pragmatism to our current social political situation. America's rise to empire has come rapidly since 1900. For the first 100 years of our history, heeding George Washington's advice, the United States of America stayed out of international conflicts. That changed at the start of our involvement in World War I in 1917. In 1941, after a direct attack by Japan and a declaration of war by Germany and its allies, the U.S. entered World War II. That worldwide conflict made America a superpower, along with the communist Soviet Union, which became our arch enemy during the Cold War. During the second half of the 20th century, the two superpowers wrangled with each other to promote their respective systems of government and impose them on the nations of the world. This dualism caused American wars in the name of democracy. Korea in 1950, Vietnam in the 1960s, the invasion of Grenada in 1983 were wars created to push the spread of democracy around the globe in the face of the terrible alternative, communism. The end of the Cold War came with the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, and soon after that, the collapse of the Soviet Union. America stood in the last decade of the 20th century as the world's only superpower, with the world's strongest military, the largest nuclear arsenal, the strongest economy, and the strongest influence in the world. The American pragmatist Cornell West writes in his 2000 book, Democracy Matters, the Cold War created a military-industrial complex in the United States that produced a vast concentration of military might, unprecedented in human history. Such might tends to intoxicate most, if not all, high-level public officials. To have such power at one's command is itself nearly inhumane, and to remain anchored in one's integrity and humility is nearly impossible. During the 1990s, whether with good or bad intentions, the U.S. asserted its powers as the policeman of the world and created wars in the name of righteousness.
Iraq and its leaders must be held liable for these crimes of abuse and destruction.
The Persian Gulf War in 1991, the occupation of Somalia in 1993, the 1994 invasion of Haiti to reinstate the democratically elected president, the 1995 bombing of Bosnia, and the 1999 bombing of Serbia were all examples of the U.S. stepping in to use its military might in the name of righteousness to control international situations. I agree with West when he asks, can any empire resist the temptation to become drunk with the wine of world power? Has not every major empire pursued quixotic dreams of global domination, of shaping the world in its image and for its interest that resulted in internal decay and doom? The 90s set us up for the current period, the war on terrorism, in which we have waged war in the name of patriotic unity. We were attacked on September 11, 2001, with great loss of civilian life on our own soil. That attack provoked the fury of our mighty empire as we invaded Afghanistan to destroy Osama bin Laden and remove the Taliban from rule. Then in 2003, President George W. Bush, acting unilaterally and against the majority of the world's wishes, invaded Iraq.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. The people of the United States and our friends and allies will not live at the mercy of an outlaw regime that threatens the peace with weapons of mass murder. We will meet that threat now with our Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, and Marines, so that we do not have to meet it later with armies of firefighters and police and doctors on the streets of our cities.
In 2003, the American people, in celebration of national unity and patriotism, actually went along with this idea. We have become a society that enjoys being on top of the world, relishing the benefits of imperial rule. If I, and many fellow patriots, like me, do not agree with our country's imperial foreign policy, we can take counsel from some of our nation's greatest thinkers, the American pragmatists. At the end of the 19th century, these men saw the imperial influence starting to take hold in America and denounced it. William James took philosophy to the street, disparaged America's conflation of gigantism with greatness, and denounced the American imperial aims of his day with a passion. Pragmatic thought reduces dualisms that separate issues and leads to a solution so the wrangling can cease. Pragmatism focuses on how we can attain the most good for the most people. Pragmatism is a form of philosophical inquiry, but is also a theory of truth. For pragmatists, seekers do not find truth by following the absolute, but by incorporating new ideas while allowing the old to bend, producing better understanding. Cornell West's 1989 book, The American Invasion of Philosophy, A Genealogy of Pragmatism, encourages turning away from epistemology-centered philosophy and its search for absolute standards of knowledge and ethics can release intellectual energy for cultural criticism, political action, and social change. It is only when a pragmatic stance on foreign policy is taken, when we realize that there is an alternative to the militarism that has unified our society for decades, that we cannot force our way of democracy on other nations, and when we believe together and take action to restore our democratic ideals, that we can be a force for peace and a role model to the nations of the world. In 1929, John Dewey postulated in his paper The Lost Individual that stability of individuality is dependent upon stable objects to which allegiance firmly attaches itself. After undergoing a change from the pre-industrial age to the industrial age, the people of his time had lost the stable objects they had previously attached themselves to in their communities. The modern world had forced them to adapt work and life according to the mass market mentality, and they needed something to which they could attach their allegiance and make themselves whole. As I have previously explained, 20th century imperialism gave American individuals something to be proud of, something that was worth living for and fighting for. For 100 years we have had a cause to rally around in the name of democracy, righteousness, and patriotic unity. But it needn't be militarism that binds our society together. William James postulates in his paper, The Moral Equivalent of War, that the war against war is going to be no holiday excursion or camping party. The military feelings are too deeply grounded to abdicate their place among our ideals until better substitutes are offered than the glory and shame that comes to nations, as well as to individuals, from the ups and downs of politics and the vicissitudes of trade. James wrote that in 1906. His visionary ability called him to recognize the coming of the imperial-minded directors of foreign policy. James also recognized that war is not about the carnage that ensues on the battlefield. He says that military preparation for war unifies the society. James wrote, "Peace in military mouths today is a synonym for war expected. Every up-to-date dictionary should say that peace and war mean the same thing, now in pos, now in act 2. It may even reasonably be said that the intensely sharp preparation for war by the nations is the real war, permanent, unceasing, and that the battles are only a sort of public verification of the mastery gained during the peace interval." I agree with James when he says that the feelings of pride that militarism and domination bring will always be found in the human spirit. His alternative is to wage war with nature, to use those energies that unite us against a common cause to overcome the domestic issues of a society. Imagine if we took the amount of money we have spent during the past 5 years fighting the war in Iraq, $514.8 billion, according to the National Priorities Project as of April 27, 2008, and put it toward a unifying fight for health care, the environment, or education. The results would be staggering. The genius minds and exemplary work ethic of the American people could make a big impact on most, if not all, of these domestic problems. In the course of the work, American society would have a democratic cause to rally around, creating social unity. Cornell West writes, "Aggressive militarism is false security, a mere division from attending to the necessary domestic policies of compassion.